Hello everybody. Those of you that follow my channel or watch my tool reviews know I'm really fairly objective when it comes to what I pay for something and what I expect to get out of it. Most of the time I can get around any shortcomings with simple modifications and things of that nature. And this particular video I have gone through 4 units and each one had various issues. When I got to the last unit, I thought things were going fairly well, and as I was stepping through in chronological order, then I discovered the inherent design issue and flaw here that could potentially be dangerous and hurt someone. So I'm never going to endorse anything where I think safety is an issue, and I'm certainly not going to put myself on the line to do so. So feel free to take a peek. Mind you, this is outlined and related to the exact model number I have listed here. The older units seem to be more robust and better built, but I believe this one is going downhill. Well, hello everybody. I'm going to do a review on this 12-inch double-bevel sliding compound miter saw with laser guide I picked up from Harbor Freight. This is item number 61970 for reference. Retail cost on these are $194.99, a 20% off coupon, so $155.99 out the door plus tax. I'd since located a $131 super coupon, which I'm going to take advantage of tomorrow when I return this unit. It does have issues with it, manufacturing defects. I will outline those. So this review is going to start with this saw right here, just a general overview of it, but the finalization of it is going to actually be a different saw. And anything I pick up there that might be different from one to the next, I will note those as I move along. So that $131 super coupon will yield me another $25 in my pocket. Not that I want to drive back over there and do it, but I'm going to take advantage of it since I have to anyway. So this is not in any way a comparison to a DeWalt slider or a Bosch or a Makita or anything else in the range of those 12-inch sliding compound miter saws. This is a well sub $200 saw, so I'm going to do my review based on that information right there, what I paid. I am going to show the features of it and things of that nature as they are right now, what it came with, this, that, and the other. It might be a little lengthy of a review, but we're going to step through it and we're going to get there. Now keep in mind, this item number I'm giving you right here, it is a different saw than the display model and whatever other videos and whatnot reviews I'd seen online. This is completely different in some of the areas, and I will kind of note those, but just look at your model numbers. Some people like to come in and comment that, you know, hey, I've got that saw and this is a problem or that's a problem. Make sure that the model number you're making reference to is the one I'm outlining. The unit was pretty much almost 100% assembled right out of the box. It did come with a dust bag that you can install on it. In my opinion, no matter the make, model, what you pay, these things are almost absolutely useless. They might collect a few chips here and there, but they're useless for collecting dust. So I may not even use that. But moving along, it did also come with a hold down clamp here. I don't typically use these, but I will show how it works if you choose to. It did come with an extra set of motor brushes, which is always a benefit. These two J looking hooks right here are actually for the cord storage. Why these were not installed at the factory, I do not know, but we will be installing those. Or at least I will show where they go, because this is going back to the store for a replacement. There are 2 screws to mount those hooks. One is a machine screw and the other one is more like a wood style screw, but this will be for like screwing into plastic. It did also come with a hex key for a blade change. I do not know if there's a provision for storing this on the unit itself, but if there is not, I need to come up with one, because I cannot stand things like this that are loose, and if you need to do a blade change, you've got to track it down. So there should be some place to put this and store it. Okay, well, I'm going to demonstrate where those J hooks go for the cord storage. They're not even really required in my opinion, because the cord is really short. outside of this cable stay right here is probably only about 36 inches long. So you could surely do something with that. But there are two different styles of these hooks. Hopefully you see the difference. The one that just has the rectangular recessed area simply goes right here. And this is where the plastic threaded or wood style threaded screw would go. The second one that has all this extrusion on it actually mounts right here, just like that, and that's where the machined screw would go. So that's really all it amounts to finish any installation or assembly procedures. Okay, well, I'm going to start going over some of the features on it. This right here locks the linear slide so the head does not move back and forth, and this would basically be how you would transport the tool. Now you can loosen this up. I am just sitting on a flimsy plastic table, so it is going to move around, but if you start moving this slide back, you can see this recessed area that's been ground or machined down in here. I think it would be nice if they would have put one of those down here as well. So if you wanted to bring this down, lock it, and just use it like a standard 12-inch chop saw without the sliding function being engaged, you could do so without fear of marring this machine surface right here that runs through the linear bearings. Not that big of a deal, but that's just something I think that could be added there with one machining operation, and it would just make it a little bit better. This is the pin right here that locks the head in the downward position for transport. When you're ready to raise it up and use it, just simply take off the load a little bit, pull this out, turn it 90 degrees, and let it fall down in this slot. And then the head will raise up and you can do what you want. When you're ready to store it or transport it, just simply push it down, reverse that operation, and there you go. Okay, another feature is in this mechanism right here between these two pieces. On the unit I saw in the store, this was actually on the other side of the saw, and with the adjustment knob right here to set a particular depth, there was a nice knurled thumb wheel. This just has a tiny little bolt on it on this thumb screw, but at this stage this arm right here has a hole in it. So when you bring this down, you can see it enters into that hole and the saw will actually go to full depth. This right here is actually the stop to prevent the blade from going too far down into the table and creating damage. You should not have to make any adjustments here, but this one is adjustable and serves a good purpose. Now this, on the other unit at the store, I could just move it over. This one I kind of have to pick it up, and I don't know if it's a manufacturing issue here, if the other one will be different, but that's what it is. And you can see it kind of blocks off that hole, and as this bolt will come down, it will contact that, and it will prevent the blade from going all the way through the work. Now that feature would be good for if you were trying to maybe cut a dado in between a length of board, or perhaps you were trying to cut a rabbet on the end of a board. You could set how far the blade would go down and just start making those cuts across and clean out the bottom. And then once you're finished with that, just simply put it back into this mode and you will be back to a full depth cut. Well, this is another difference between the floor model I looked at and this unit, which is this stop right here. This on the floor model unit was up in this arena, and it seemed to be very robust and work just fine. This one seems to be a little bit flimsy. I will know better on the new unit if there's something going on here, but in order to use this, you would simply loosen this up. Let's say if you wanted to bevel off to the left, you would rise away and you would set the bevel to wherever you wanted and lock it in. When you come back, it should rest on dead on 90. If you want to bevel the saw the other way or tilt it the other way, just simply move this out of the way and you can get beyond it. And then when you want to go back to 90, simply put it back, rest on the saw, and then tighten this back up. Now I am on kind of a rickety table here, but I can visibly see flex in this unit right here. I do not know if this is tightened up properly. I'm not even going to look at it until I get the new unit in place. But that is how that works. I will also note while I'm here that all the pointer references on this are a plastic. I'm used to seeing metal. I don't recall if the one at the store had metal pointers or not. I don't care for the plastic, but they seem like they'd be up to the job. The fence itself is not really very robustly built, but it seems like it's adequate enough. This particular thumb screw out here, you can loosen it up and slide the top of the fence rail out. And you'll need to do that to make your 45-degree bevel cuts for sure. Probably have to move it all the way out like this. Just make sure that you get that in the right spot. But it is adjustable and you can take it back in and tighten these up. This particular hole right here is where you would install the hold down clamp. There is one on either side, and the other fence operates just like this as well. Tighten this up, plain and simple. Move this, set it on your work, give it some cranks, and it should hold your work down. Like I said, I don't particularly use these things, but it is there for those that might want to. It does have a work support on either end that you can adjust out. They're not very long. You just loosen up this thumb screw here, and you can see how short they really are. There's no positive stop to tell you how far you can actually go out before it comes out, but push it in there and tighten this up. Seems okay. There is a guard here that you can raise up, or a stop, to make repetitive cuts within whatever range limitations it has. So there are two other thumb screws in here. You can loosen and raise this up, and I just found another issue. I'll address that real quick, and the remedy that mine will be getting. But that's how those work, and there is one on either end. Well, this would be one of the first modifications I'll be doing on the replacement saw, providing I choose to keep it, which I think I will. When you loosen these thumb screws up here and pull this up to its maximum height, there is a curled lip on the bottom to give it some rigidity, and when you go to tighten it, you can see it's pushing it down and up. The simple modification here is going to be to put a flat washer behind this to space this out so it does not contact that lip. Shouldn't be that way, but a simple remedy, no big deal. Okay, well, here's another small issue I've located. I do have an idea to remedy this, and if it doesn't take care of it altogether, then it should at least minimize it somewhat. Of course, it has a handle out front like most chop saws, where you can lock down your table. So loosen it up, and then of course there's indents or detents where you can hit specific degrees that are common. But when you hit those and you get it into place, even before you lock this down, you can see there's a little bit of play right here. I know where it is, and I'll show that momentarily, but there is a little bit of back and forth movement. So depending on the accuracy that you're shooting for, your repeatability may not be that accurate, as well as you may not be dead on 90 degrees to the table, depending on where this is. It may be acceptable for coarse cutters, but I myself am going to try to make it as fine as possible. Alright, well, here's where I see the problem is. It's in one of 2 points, maybe both. I'll know more when I actually get in to modify this, and I will outline it. But you can see this stanchion, or this stay right here. There's one on either side of this plastic arm, which is actually the arm that goes into those detents. And if I wiggle the end where you would pick up with your finger to drop it and move it around, you'll see some play right here. You'll see it rocking back and forth. Secondly, in these stanchions or stays right here, where this is mounted, I see movement in this as well. Back and forth. So I'm going to attempt to put shims, spacers, whatever I need to in these areas. Maybe put something on here to take up the slack right here, and at least, like I said, minimize this movement right here to what would be acceptable for me. Well, here's the laser right here that will project a line out onto the work. I have test fired at least, and it does put a very nice line out. However, it is trigger fired. It does not come on until you actually have the motor running. I did see a review about a year or so ago where someone had done a modification and actually put like a a single throw toggle switch somewhere on the unit, like in the handle, to where they could just turn it on and have the laser line working without the blade spinning, so they could position their work and then make a cut. And of course, you know, flip it off when you're not using it. I may do that later. Actually seems like a pretty good idea, providing this is accurate. I do not like the placement of it. It is pretty much directly behind the blade, so all the chips and the sawdust are going to go right towards that laser. So the optics on it are pretty much going to get crusted up really soon, so you may spend a lot of your time cleaning that off. I do see there are some adjustments here on the side. It looks like there are 3 screws. The one in the center has a lock nut on it, or a jam nut. My best guess is the one with the jam nut will move the laser that way or this way, back and forth, to get it in line with the blade itself, and then the 2 outer adjustments set the cant, or how it is positioned across the work. It looks like it's going to be a fickle situation to dial that in, because one is going to affect the other and the other is going to affect that back again. But we will find out later. I don't particularly rely on lasers, but since it's here, if I can get it dialed in and trust it, I might start using it. Now this is a belt-driven saw, and I highly prefer belt-driven tools over direct drive-driven tools, especially table saws. Chop saws aren't quite as bad in terms of noise, but this actually is a pretty quiet running saw, obviously without the blade. I will let you hear it before it goes back to the store, but there is a belt underneath this belt guard right here. There is a gearbox on the other side of this, and I will be tearing it apart on the new unit to inspect the quality of grease they have in it, and if I'm not satisfied with it, I'm going to be packing it with some good grease. Well, for that matter, if I'm going into it, I'm going to put a known good grease into it, and I will show you how I do that. There is a spindle lock right here. You can push this as you're rotating the spindle and find a detent and make for a quick blade change, so you're not holding the blade trying to get that fastener off the other side. Very good feature. Well, here's where the magic starts to happen on the handle itself. This does not rotate in any ways like some saws, like my other for example, but I always use them in this fashion anyway. This does have a dual safety on it. So typically you would use your right hand, toggle this with your thumb, and pull the trigger. And now the saw is running. Let it go, won't run. This one actually has one on the other side. If you want to use it with your left hand, you can toggle this in with your thumb and still engage the saw. That's actually a pretty neat feature right there. I don't know if the other larger saws are like this, but pretty cool. Now this side is a little less friendly. It feels a little sticky when I push this in there. But this one feels absolutely seamless, flawless, no catches. My assumption is these 2 socket head cap screws, as well as these jam nuts behind them, are to set the stops at both of your 45s. So if you try to dial your machine in and it's not quite at a 45, you would loosen this up, make your adjustment, tighten this up, and check it. Which one of these are which, meaning the left 45 stop or the right 45 stop, I do not know, but those are the adjustments right there to my knowledge. Okay, well they claim this to be 3,800 RPMs, a 15 amp motor with a 1-inch arbor. Well, it does not have a 1-inch arbor. I'm taking the arbor bolt out right now, and of course they are left-handed threads. And the outer flange is a nice machined flange. There is a reducer, and then of course the inner flange right here. Well, that is not a 1-inch arbor on this, that is a 1/2-inch arbor. This makes it into a 1-inch arbor, this reducer right here. So this would go inside your 1-inch arbor saw blade, and you would mount it on here, and then of course install your outer cup and your hold down bolt, and you're good to go. But that's just a little stretching of the truth when they say a 1-inch arbor. It's a 1-inch arbor capable, or 1-inch saw blade capable. Well, now we're getting into why it's going back to the store for an exchange. This first issue is not even anything I was going to concern myself with unless I needed to address it later. I was going to fix it. The second one is the true reason, and we'll get to that momentarily. But the fence is held down with 2 socket head cap screws from the top, and they're threaded through the casting through threaded holes. So when I got the unit out of the box, I flipped it upside down just so I could make sure the castings weren't fractured or damaged in any way. And they were not. But I noticed this little piece of wire right here. Can you see that? Little piece of wire coming out of the hole where the bolt is. So what they had done at the factory when they were adjusting the fence and tightening things up is they stripped the casting out. So rather than send it over for repair or just discard it and recycle it, they elected to take the bolt out, put some wire through there, and then run the bolt back in to tighten up the threads. Later, I was going to put a helicoil insert in that if I needed to, but that's just something that I would come to expect here and there from quality control. But still kind of took me back. Alright, well here's the main reason on why it's going back to the store. The other issue I noted I could deal with or address it later at my leisure. I wasn't concerned about that. But this one, however, does anybody see a problem here? What's wrong here? There are no threads in this hole. Way down in there, there were about 1.5 to 2 threads, and you can see this was just barely stripped or galled in there to hold the arm, which would in turn raise the guard. So this is the main reason why it's going back to the store. This is something I could fix. But here's something that's a little bit perplexing. I can't quite get my head around it. This plastic chute right here, which is where the dust bag would go on, it is covered inside and out with what looks like graphite. I'm not real certain, but it looks like graphite, and it is only this plastic boot right here, this piece. It is nowhere else anywhere on the machine, inside and out. Nothing. So I will be inspecting the new one and see if it exhibits whatever that stuff is. I will be cleaning it off, but I thought that was a little bit odd. Alright, well I'm going to go ahead and let you hear it. I went ahead and pulled off all the Arbor hardware. No blade, but we're just going to spin it up. The camera is probably less than 24 inches away from it, so hopefully it doesn't drown you out. I'll try to hold this up. So here we go. Not too bad. Like I said, I am going to take this gearbox apart and re-lubricate it. I do hear a little bit of gear noise or something in here, so that should, a good grease, help attenuate that. But all in all, it really is quiet. Well, alright guys, here's another saw. I took the other one back, of course, a no-hassle exchange. I also supplied them with the $131 super coupon I had located online somewhere, and they promptly refunded me $26 and change. I never have any problems with them in that regard of customer service dealing with my local store. Great transaction. So I did the exchange, and I of course unboxed it outside the store and inspected it to make sure all the issues I had currently addressed were taken care of, and they were. The first one being where this was pulled out or stripped out. I looked at it again today before I went over there with fresh eyes, and this is a plastic molding right here, and there's simply a hex nut that is pushed up in from the back end. So what they did at the factory was started stripping that, which is why there was only two threads intact, and in essence pushed that out so it wasn't getting a full bite on the fastener. I could have fixed that, no big deal, but I wanted to get some of my money back, and I really didn't care for the fact that they had fixed a stripped hole in the casting down here with a piece of wire. I would have addressed that later, but if I needed to adjust the fence on the fly or something like that to get it back into square, I didn't want to have to mess with it. The third issue was the one I had noted back here on this particular 90 stop that you can move out of the way to be able to tilt the head past it. Had a lot of play in it. This one is super tight, does not exhibit that at all. It actually works really well. It could have just been an adjustment on the other one. I didn't play with it, but that's what it is on this one. Now the only thing I did not do before I left was when they're packed for shipment, there's a large cable tie that goes around here. I did not snip that cable tie off and run through the linear slides. I should have. The one I had last night was silky smooth. Even smoother than the high-end branded ones I looked at the big box stores. It felt great. This one, however, does not. Here's the problem. Without a load on it, it seems to work just fine. But as soon as you start dropping the head, it puts pressure on those linear bearings, and I can just hardly get this thing to move. So something's going on with the linear bearings back here in the head. There is some telltale signs of wear on the top and around this particular side right here. There are only 3 linear bearings in this. There are 2 on this side and only 1 on this side. Why did they not put a 4th in here? I do not know. This is not in the way to be able to put one, but there is only 3. But this one unfortunately has to go back as well, because it is rougher than anything you've ever seen. So I'll address that, take it back tomorrow, even though I shouldn't have to. It's really only a 4-mile round trip off my beaten path that I'm traveling anyway. So I'll do that and continue the video. I did also note that there was some graphite type material or looking stuff on this boot right here. This one has it on there as well. I do not know exactly why it's just only here, but that could have been from the motor brushes being burned in. That could be motor brush dust right there. Why it's not anywhere else on the unit, who knows? It may have been a static issue and they dusted it off with some air and it just will not blow it off. But that's what it is. So, like I said, this one is going back to the store. I'm going to get another one and we're going to try take 3. I really need this to work. I really need this to work because I do not want to have to pony up for a name brand saw for what I'm trying to do with this. Well, alright guys, this is take number 3 on this saw, and this one's got to go back as well. I was going through a hardcore inspection at the store and I got distracted by another shopper who was inquiring about the saw, and I was telling him the problems I've been having with them, and I missed something on this one, and it's right here. They've got the same shaft in both sides. It does not work that way. I said that there was space for another linear bearing in here and didn't know why they didn't install one. Well, I do now. This groove that's cut down in this shaft, this recess, is where this stops the head from sliding. So you can't put another bearing there or that groove is going to go bump bump as it rides through the bearings. Well, they put the same shaft on the other side. This should be a solid ground shaft, and this does have 2 linear bearings. So right here, when this goes into this back linear bearing, it's rough as all get out, jumping around trying to get in and out of that groove as the balls run around inside that bearing. I'm really trying to get this saw to work out, and I'm assuming it is a new model number. This is the new version, but they don't have all the kinks worked out yet. And of course their quality control has always been spotty at best, but come on. So I've got to make another trip and go for number 4. This is going to be my last one. I am not leaving the store until I'm at least satisfied with all the mechanical aspects of it, and I'm not going to get distracted this time. And then I'll check out the motor and everything else when I get it back and can put it under power, which I don't see that being an issue. Yeah. Well, alright guys, here's saw number 4. I actually have 2 Harbor Freights in my area, so I drove a little further and went to a different one, thinking maybe they had a different stock, different lot, maybe out of a different factory. I actually went in and spoke with the store manager before I even took my old unit in there and explained to him my plight, and what I wanted to do was just simply unbox one right then and there and let me give it a once over and inspect it. So he sent me back into the warehouse with one of the other workers and said, pick out the best box you can find, get it out for him, let him look at it. If that's not good, get another one. And the first one we opened looked like it was on the top of the pile because the box was in perfect condition. And this is the saw that came out of it. It actually has all the right components on it. There are only 2 minor issues with this, and I will address both of those. Everything else seems to be working just fine, linear slides and all. So I think now we can continue the review and any modifications I'm going to do. The first problem was, and not even really a problem, the spring is dry, so you can hear it creaking under here. I'm going to be applying a light oil to that, and then we're going to hear it again. Alright, well, I oiled it up, and it took a while of working it around for it to finally shut up, but I am going to hold the guard up because there's a secondary noise we're going to address momentarily, but now you can hear it's nice and quiet. None of that creaking. This guard is doing a little bit of chattering when it's going down. So we're going to go ahead and take this apart in real time. I'm going to start by removing this screw right here. This is the one that was stripped on the first unit. Just going to do it like that. Now underneath this, if you raise the guard all the way up, there's a screw right here. Don't take it all the way out, just loosen it. And then take the key that came with the unit, and you can remove this one right here, and this will drop out like that, and then you can get to this screw to remove it the rest of the way. There we go. So we'll get this over to the bench and see if we can figure out what's going on with it. Alright, well, I was shooting a clip on this, taking it apart to try to fix the problem, and it turned out to be a heck of a lot more than what I anticipated. I did take the clear guard off here so I can show you what I did. Anyway, to get this apart, there's a nylock on the back, which really shouldn't even be required if the parts were made properly. But it is what it is, so take that part off. And then on the front there's a large fender washer with a Phillips screw in it. So we'll get this out of here. It was lubricated with grease, but I've since cleaned it off. Okay, so this part is indexed. There's a large hole right here. Under that is this plate right here, and of course the spring right here. The first thing I noticed was the spring right here on the end was actually straight, and it was binding up in this area and it was skipping. So I just took a pair of pliers and bent a little angle on that, so now that can ride up and down this plastic and not create a problem. This part, nothing much to say about it. This is the part that was incorrectly manufactured. You can see how hammered this thing is now. This is what I had to do to make it work. When this thing was pressed out and stamped, I don't know if you can see how high this side is right here and how low this side is right here. It's definitely there. This should, if it was made correctly, sit firm in here, but still yet leave enough room for this to pivot around, eliminating the need for a nylock or a lock nut on the back. So if it was made correctly, simply just put the screw in the front, tighten it up, and you're done. This cannot get loose if it is tight. So I think this was an afterthought where they had some manufacturing issues. So to correct the problem, I had to go in here beat this up all the way around. You can see I just like drilled on it. I started going in very painstakingly, and before I knew it, I was just saying, I gotta make this work. And I was just hitting it with a hammer in between two blocks of wood like this and driving around this to bowl this up. Then I took it to my bench grinder and I ground around this area to help make it more straight. Crazy. So what I will end up doing is lubricating the spring with some grease. I'll put a little bit of grease around here, a little bit of grease around here, as well as this side just a little bit, and then I'll put some right here and around this lip, and I'll put it back together. I will tighten it up as tight as I can get it, and then I'll check it, and if it snags, I'll back this off until it just loosens up, and then I will put the jam nylock on the back. Crazy. Well, alright, it's been reinstalled. Working much better. There's a slight amount of skipping to it, but not so much that it would bind up and not drop down while the blade's spinning down, leaving all this area exposed. I originally thought that this skipping was because it was not oiled on the spring, but live and learn. They were two separate issues. So now I can move on. I will note that the downfeed spring, the tension on it, it is quite stiff. You know, you got to use some force to bring it down, much more than I'm used to, like with my other saw, for example, but certainly doable. I should mention that the saw does not come with a blade. I wouldn't use it anyway, even if it did. I did pick up a 12-inch Frood Diablo blade, an 80 tooth. I really like these blades. They're a good mid-range cost blade. I'm installing it primarily because I'm going to start making some measurements with some tools to see how dialed in the saw is. I will also note that that 1-inch reducer or bushing that they put in there fits absolutely perfectly, at least on this unit. So we'll get this snugged up, and while I'm doing this, that dust boot that had that graphite on it from the motor brushes is what I assume it was. It was not on this one for whatever reason, just as a note. Alright, well that's installed. Let me get it plugged in real quick, and I'm going to just spin it up with the blade on it so I can watch it from the front and see how well it runs true. I'm going to stand off to the side and bump it once just to make sure nothing flies apart. It's actually really quiet while it's running. When it's spinning down, I guess I'm hearing some of the motor, because there is no brake on it. I'm hearing the motor whine in there. Not a big deal. Well, alright guys, I'm claiming the agony of defeat. This one's going to go back, and I'll explain why, briefly, momentarily. But in the last clip, I noted that there was a noise as it was spinning down without power applied to it. And I attributed that to being the motor, but I honestly believe it was something else, and I will outline that. Secondly, I noticed a lot of run out in the blade, and the blades I use typically have almost zero run out. So I had quite a bit of run out in the blade, and I was trying to backtrack everything down the line, and even breaking out, you know, $600–700 worth of measuring equipment to get in here and try to figure out where the problem is. On a saw I paid $131 and change for. I really wanted this to work out, but it's simply not going to. There's another major issue with it. This is extremely lightly built. Now the ones that I'd seen on the display model at the store are not the same saw. They're built like a tank. I really wanted to get one of those and get it out of the box, but they're no longer available. This is a different animal altogether. So depending on your expectations and of course your budget and your level of precision you expect to get out of this, when you set it at 0, you would expect to get a 90-degree cut or very well close to it, or 15, 22 and a half, 31.6, 45, whatever. And you would like repeatability. The saw will not provide that. Simply, point blank, it will not. So I'll start moving in and showing you what I've discovered. Well, here's the gearbox housing removed. There are 4 screws in here that you have to take out. And let me tell you, this is the first time in my life I've ever seen a China fastener eat not 1 but 2 of my snap-on bits. I'm not very happy about that. And they were super tight. They put them on there with, I don't know what, an impact gun. This is the nasty grease, if you want to call it that I expected to see in here. There's very little up on the actual gear mesh. So this particular portion right here, I would have cleaned out anyway, and I would recommend folks doing that, but you'll have a very difficult time getting those screws out. Now this right here is the pinion shaft. And then it does ride on this other end in this bearing right here. I don't know if this will pick up, but the run out in this shaft is just crazy atrocious. It's bent in some manner, and I'll actually show it from the other side as well. A lot of run out in there. So what I think is actually happening is this is allowed to wiggle in some way, and it's increasing and decreasing the mesh on the gear set. Maybe not a big deal in the short term, but over the long haul, that's it. But that's going to also introduce vibration into the tool. Well, here's one of the other problems. Somebody put this pulley on with a sledgehammer, apparently. It's a very nicely machined aluminum grooved pulley, but hopefully you can see the run out in that. It's probably better than 50 thousandths of run out that is wobbling back and forth. Alright, well this is the end all be all reason on why it's going back. It's lack of rigidity. Now I had mentioned that this was a lightly built saw, very well unlike the display model, and here is a complete representation with demonstration on why it is going back. I've set up a dial indicator right here that is touching the flange, the outer side of the flange, that would in essence clamp the blade. This casting is so lightly built, I'm just simply going to squeeze this. Keep your focus on the needle there. You see all that deflection right there? With just a light squeeze, that's 25 thousandths of lateral movement. And I could also move it out easily about 25 thousandths. Now that's right here, kind of down in the core where the casting should be really robust. I'm going to take my hand, only using 2 fingers, and I'm going to put them up on the handle where you would come through to make a cut. I'm going to do the very same thing. You see that? I can get 100 thousandths with very little effort in that direction, and I will do the other way and I get about 100 thousandths as well. So this is why I say the saw would never make an accurate cut. The only way it could is if you were dead on coming through that plane of travel with this blade. Any deviation? No way. If you tilt the saw down to, let's say, 45 degrees and kind of come through a compound cut like that, you're not going to be able to travel that saw directly through there. So for my application, this is simply not going to produce any results that are up to my expectation. And my expectation was very minimal given what I paid for the saw. But this is not even acceptable in any manner. There's nothing I can do to correct that. Well, here's another representation on that flexing I was speaking of. I actually loaded the blade back on it, and I have an indicator rig setting here. Now mind you, I'm measuring out here towards the front of the blade because I cannot get back in the middle. So what you're about to see will be worse if I could get that back in the middle. I've got the head locked in the downward position, and this would simulate the end of a cut when you're getting ready to break through and finalize a cut. I'm simply going to take my palm and set it on the handle, and I'm going to do my best to pull straight down on this. Watch this needle here. We're at 96 thousandths of an inch of deflection, of lateral movement. I'm going to do it one more time. That time was closer to 98. And those are errors in myself. There's 100 thousandths. So if I put my hand or my two fingers out here towards the right hand side of it, of the handle, I'll pull down. Haven't even started moving it down yet. Now it's starting to move down. We're crossing 100 thousandths, 5, 10, 15, about 115, 16 or 17 thousandths of an inch. And I'll do it on the inside. We're about 25 thousandths on that one, pulling directly down on the inside. 27. So what that is doing, and you're seeing it in real time, if you're trying to at least just simply make a 90-degree cut, this blade is going to be traveling in at an arc. And depending on how it's being pulled is the severity of that arc. To me, that is a recipe for disaster. That's kickback city waiting to happen when you're trying to simply make a cut through a piece of board, and if the blade is constantly shifting, then you might actually catch a side of that work and it's going to rip it out of your hands or damage the saw in some way. So this is really, really, really bad. And that's one reason why I'm not even going to make a cut, because I'm not going to put myself in harm's way, knowing full well what it is capable of producing. Well, alright guys, I summed up most of my thoughts on this in the last clip, but I do need to add to it. I was hoping to get myself a reasonable saw for a reasonable price that I could modify, dial in, and finish some work to it and save a lot of money. In this case, it's just simply not going to happen. I am not going to put myself on the line for what I see as a potential hazard, nor would I endorse someone else doing the very same thing. So they have typically been very good over the years about each successive thing they put out being better than the last. This is one where they're going retro. They're going the other direction with it. And until they bring that back, the quality and the robustness and the build of at least the models that I'd seen on display, I would not recommend this saw to anyone. If you do choose to pick one up, or if you already have one, be mindful of what I've said. If you've got one, pay mind to it. Be careful. Share your experience with everyone. If you don't, pay heed to what I'm saying. I hope this helps someone in some way. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck.